Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 13 of Drink It In, my podcast. It's called The Chosen Path. Now, sometimes these ideas come to me just like boom in my head, and then I go with it. But this idea of doing The Chosen Path really came from my husband. We were away for Rosh Hashanah by friends of his, and those friends had a friend that my husband had met prior, and he said, "This guy, Jordana, his name is Jeff. He is so interesting. He's a convert. You should really interview him, and you should do the whole season around him. Like, do a whole season of converts." And I'm like, okay. So it took me some time to actually connect to Jeff, but thank God we finally connected. And I have him today on the podcast, and I would really like him to introduce himself. I personally have not heard his story, so I'm going to be just as intrigued as the rest of you to find out a little bit about his background, where he lives, and what brought him to this chosen path. So, Jeff, take it away. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Jordana, it's such a pleasure to have this chance to chat with you. Yeah, so my name is Jeff Haar, and I am proudly a convert. I've been Jewish for 40 years now, but I'd like to say that I started my conversion process about 50 years ago. And I'm going to start out with a kind of some credit to an important person in my life. Although he wasn't involved in the early stages where I was going through conversion, I'm sure a lot of your audience know Tovia Singer. Rabbi Tovia Singer talks about really there's two conversions in Judaism. There's conversion where you leave paganism, you leave idolatry, and you embrace the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's what I mean by 50 years ago, I did that. And that continued the process, growing from there. And then a few years later, I joined the Jewish people, what he calls the second type of conversion, become a Ger Tzedek. So that's been a few years now. You make me go back and think about my life, which is something I've been doing for the past year. I started writing a book about my life. And I know you kind of just asked me prior to this podcast started, what prompted me to convert, what inspired me to go through conversion. And so the name of my book is I Never Really Planned to Be Jewish.
Okay.
I am the last person in the world who should be on this podcast with you. And I'm going to try to explain what I mean. I have to go back, like you asked, where did I grow up? Where did I come from? So I grew up in the middle of America, practically the middle of the 48 continental states, in a place called Sioux City, Iowa. And people always say, are there Jews out there in Sioux City? Yes, there are Jews in Sioux City. In fact, 2.5% of my city, my town, had Jews. I had Jewish classmates. There are 3 synagogues there. A lot of the kosher meat was being processed in Sioux City. There were Orthodox Jews there, Reformed, conservative Jews. But I had nothing to do with the Jewish people in Sioux City. I was brought up Lutheran. I was brought up in what's called Missouri Synod Lutheran. I had a religious home. I was the oldest child, the oldest of 5. When I was 15 years old, for some reason, this was a couple of years after the 1967 war, there was a televangelist making the rounds, and he came to Sioux City, and my parents wanted to go and hear him. Very unusual for my father to do this because he did not like to have anything that was ecumenical. He would not even like to visit other Christian churches. He only went to Missouri Synod Lutheran churches. So it was quite a surprise. And he really got a big surprise at the end of that trip because when we finished the lecture, the sermon by this evangelist, I responded to the altar call. So what that means, I came down after hearing him, and they called for people who want to give their life to God. I responded to that invitation.
What was it? What was it that he said that really prompted you to do that?
Oh, pretty much the traditional message of Christianity is that, you're a sinner and that you don't deserve to be connected to God. You will go to hell because you don't have the right credentials. You can't be perfect, but God can save you through his son, Jesus. So just give your life to Jesus and you can be assured of salvation. And what happened in his message was I felt that even though I've been in the church and very active in the church as a young person, an altar boy and all that, I hadn't really been sincere in some ways. I didn't feel I had committed myself really to God. And this is what I responded to that idea. And I gave my life to God at that age. And I started a whole series of different things after that, of course. So they call that being born again in the Christian world. Okay. And that's not something normal for Lutherans. They say you're born again when you get baptized as a baby. So it really bothered my father that I went through that experience. But for my mother, who was not raised Lutheran, she was very empathetic to me and supportive. And she encouraged me in my new walk with the Lord, I'd say, helping me with Bible studies and different things like that. So I don't want to get into all the kind of detail. I just want you to know that in high school, I was a very dynamic, committed, devout Christian teenager. I was called a Jesus freak. My best friend and I, we were involved in a lot of outreach activities. I created a newspaper called Jesus News. We made like 5 issues of this. Back in those days, there was a counterculture going on, and little street newspapers was very popular. And that's what I was trying to copy and reach people that way. I organized a parade that had over 10,000 people in it. Basically, all the churches had a Jesus Day, and we marched down in like a parade. There were a lot of things I did that I was trying to help other people and influence them and bring them to Jesus. And many kids did convert and give their life to Jesus because of my involvement. It wasn't a surprise to anybody when I graduated that I announced that I was going to go to seminary, become a Lutheran minister. So I went to college at Concordia College, Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota. And I continued my same evangelistic, enthusiastic ways, trying to influence people. I was very surprised at college. Here it was a Lutheran school, a private school, mostly kids who wanted to become ministers, social workers, or teachers, all brought up in the church. But my roommate and very few other people had a born-again experience. And so I was witnessing to them very much about, the need to really give their life to God. I did have a lot of people respond to that. And I led people through Bible studies, a bunch of different things. There was one particular program that I wanted to get involved in back as a freshman in college called the Lutheran Evangelistic Movement. I didn't have enough evangelism in my life. And for your audience, they don't know what evangelism means. That means to go out and share the good news with people. Okay, the good news of Jesus. So I wanted to join the Lutheran Evangelistic Movement because they had a singing program during the summer. And if I could get on this small group of 30 kids, I could go around. The planned tour was to the Northeast, to New York, Maine, and so forth, and go around and influence even a lot more people. So this was a big goal of mine, and I was successful. They accepted me onto the program, and I was able to go out east, come out east here. So you got the impression that I'm pretty much committed to God, right?
You're committed. You're passionate. You're like all in, as they say.
Yeah, all in. And I'm all of about 19 years old.
Right.
So 2 interesting things happened during that summer. The first thing that happened was a friend of mine who lived on Long Island invited me to come and visit. And he, as you can imagine, he was a very committed Christian as well. But I came to visit for a week before I had to go on the tour with the Lutheran Evangelistic Movement, go through training and everything with them. And when I came there, lo and behold, there was a special event on Sunday night. Now, most Christians don't go to church on Sunday night. They have church services on Sunday morning. Maybe there's a weekday service or a study group or something like that. But go to church on Sunday night is very unheard of. So I thought that was kind of strange, but I said I'd go with him. But not only did his church have Sunday night services, but it was going to go all night long. And it were over 1,000 people were there. And they started out praying in small groups. And then eventually, as the night wore on till 2, 3 in the morning, they were all kind of gathered around in kind of concentric circles around the ministers. And this praying went on, like I say, all night long. And I heard many times people calling out, Yeshua, Yeshua. And this is the first time I ever heard that expression used, and they were referring to Jesus by his Hebrew name. And so what I discovered later that night is these people were trying to reinstitute a practice mentioned in the New Testament. It's called Pentecost there, but in Jewish tradition, it's called Shavuot. Well, we stay up all night and we study
funny,
Torah.
That's what I was thinking when you were saying, like, oh, it sounds like Shavuos.
Yes, and that's what the night was. That night was Shavuot.
Oh, okay.
And when I found out is that my friend's church had recently started to adopt some Jewish traditions. And this was the first holiday they were celebrating. I found that very interesting, but it wasn't life-changing for me at that point, but it is going to have an impact on me.
Right. Planted a seed.
Yes, it did plant a seed. So there's a second thing that planted a seed. I think you'll find this interesting. For all I know, you could have been one of the people I was talking to. So later that summer, when the Lutheran evangelistic movement was making the tour, where did they come back to? They come back to Long Island, and they gave us a day off to go to Jones Beach. So I'm at Jones Beach with a couple of my friends, and what do we want to do? We want to witness our faith and start talking to other kids, adults, whoever we can, without being too obtrusive, because after all, people are on the beach and they want to have fun. But there were people lying on the beach towels next to us, and we started witnessing to them. And I'm usually the instigator of these things. For some reason, I wasn't having any progress. These 3 girls, that's why you could have been one of them for all I know.
Probably not. I wasn't on the beach, so it's okay.
Okay. Well, they had an answer to every one of my points. And it turns out these were all 3 Jewish girls had gone to yeshiva. So they knew about what Messiah was supposed to do, and it was very different than I said. Messiah is going to come and die for your sins. They said, "What are you talking about? That's Meshuggah." They started telling me all kinds of different points of view. And this is the first time since I had been so involved in evangelism where I really had absolutely no progress with a small group of people. Not one person responded. It was kind of eye-opening and shocking to me that I had no success with these people.
Wow.
And the result of that summer from these 2 experiences was I was going to go back to college, and I really wanted to figure out what is going on with the Jewish people. What do I need to do so I can reach them better? And how can I just understand, more about, I guess, Jesus, this Yeshua person? Because up to this point, I always thought of him as a Gentile. I always thought of him as, like myself, he was a Christian more than he was a Jew, right? Yeah. So the only thing is, Concordia College doesn't have Jews go to the university there. I'm sure they would let them in, but that's not one of the places you probably go to enroll, right? And so I really was praying fervently on how can I meet some Jewish people in my life.
Okay.
So something you should know about me. I wanted to get through college quickly. I was able to get my first year of college. After one semester, I had gotten enough credits from college level examination program, like advanced placement classes and stuff, that they said when I came back that second year, I didn't even do a sophomore year of college. I just went straight into my junior year. And I said, how can I finish this even faster so I can get to the real meaty part of seminary? And so I took the maximum load of classes that semester. And I also enrolled at the University of Minnesota, which was a few miles away. And I was going to take some history classes there. And I was coming in October, early October. I remember this is, I think, a Tuesday night. I got off my bicycle and I was walking to the lecture hall, and I heard a lot of noise around the bend over by the commons. And I said, I got to go figure out what is all that commotion going on over there. And remember, I've been praying to meet Jewish people. And I come over there, and what I see is a crowd of people standing around watching a different group of people in the middle. And the people in the middle are dancing around in a circle and singing songs.
Mm-hmm.
And these are Jews. They all have yarmulkes on. Hey, awesome. This is interesting. I guess I can meet Jews here at the University of Minnesota.
Mm.
You won't believe what happened next. One of the guys who was dancing around, I don't know who he was. He didn't know me. He says, hey, come and join us. You're one of us. I don't know what do you mean? Okay, I came and I danced around in the circle in the hora with them. I guess I looked Jewish to them.
Okay.
So they brought me around, and then after a few more times around, the next thing I know, they handed me the Sefer Torah.
Mm.
So you know what day that was?
Simchas Torah.
Yeah, it was Simchat Torah. So now I've had...
But they had two exposures, Shavuos, Simchas Torah. But I'm thinking to myself, Jeff, most people would say you prayed and prayed and prayed, and you met a bunch of Jews. Most people probably at this point in your story will tell you should have prayed for $1 million, right? Maybe around the bend.
I wasn't interested in money in those days.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So that was my exposure to Simchat Torah.
Okay.
And the other thing that happened that fall was I went to the dean of the students and said, how come you don't have Hebrew offered? I have to take Greek. To be a Lutheran minister, you have to be able to read the New Testament in its original language. Oh. And believe it or not, they also require you to know how to read the Old Testament, the Tanakh, in Hebrew. But they said, no, there aren't enough people who want to take Hebrew now. Mostly they take that in like their 4th or 5th year. So you're going to have to wait. I said, I don't want to wait. You see, I'm running a rush. I'm trying to get things done. I said, what's it going to take to get a Hebrew class here this semester? He said, well, the minimum, you need to have 10 people sign up, and then I'll get a professor. And it's already September, so you can't start this in November. You got to do it soon. So I was able to get 5 more friends to sign up, and the Greek professor. The Greek professor was worth 3 people. Because between the 5 of me and him, the dean said, okay, you got enough people. And so I started to learn Hebrew that 2nd year in college.
Wow. And
it was really eye-opening. And look, I do not speak Hebrew fluently. I can read and daven, it was not conversational Hebrew. It's biblical Hebrew.
Right.
And it opened up my eyes that first year, just basic sentences, to realize that a lot of the things that I have been reading as a Christian in my Bible translation wasn't exactly the same as it was in Hebrew. Mm. And that's another one of those little seeds that, well, it's going to bear fruit later on. Let's just say. Yeah. Mm. So that 2nd year of college, I am getting a little bit of exposure to some Jewish things. You might find it funny. I had a job, to help pay for school. I wanted to have a work study program. So I'm taking all these classes. I'm taking classes at the university. And what's the best job I could get? I said, I got a job at the library.
Okay. Well, you like to learn. It makes sense.
Yeah. And what do they have there? They have Jewish books.
Ah.
So, well, the first book I found was the Jewish Encyclopedia.
Okay.
And I found some things there, articles that interested me. Yeah. So those are kind of some of the early things that influenced me. Now, I'm still not anywhere close to converting on the first degree, like I told you, right? Mm-hmm. But something is about to happen that no one could have foreseen. Mm-hmm. I am getting interested in Jewish music. I'm influencing some of my friends about that. I am interested in the fact that the real name of Jesus would have been Yeshua or Yehoshua and all these other disciples. And I'm starting to wonder more and more about what were conditions really like in that first century. Mm-hmm. And they don't teach you that in seminary. That's not what they're interested in telling you.
They're not focused on that.
It just so happened, though, my friend back in Long Island invited me back to visit him. And when I got there,
Don't tell me it's
um,
Pesach.
no,
Okay.
uh, but this was a very big impact on my life at that point. My friend and I, of course, you didn't have cell phones back then. You had to put quarters into
Into the
payphones.
payphone, right?
Yeah, and you wrote letters. So he was a pen pal of mine. And the plan was that I was going to come out there that summer. We'd work together. I could make more money working on Long Island than I could back in Iowa or something. And and what the heck? There's Jones Beach to go to, right? And there's Jewish people in New York. Maybe I can start doing a better job witnessing to them. So I fly into New York. He picks me up at LaGuardia, and on the way driving to Long Island, he says, "Jeff, I'm sorry I have to surprise you, but you won't be able to stay with me tonight." And what? And the whole plan was that we're going to be no. I don't worry. I found some place that you can go to. You'll like these people. They have 5 kids. They're very nice people, and I just have something I got to go and do tonight, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Okay, what can I do? I'm already off the plane. I'm going to go back home. He takes me to Massapequa, introduces me to the family. They show me my room, and there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and people are taking showers and getting all cleaned up. And then the next thing I know, they invite me to the dinner table, and this lady has lit candles.
Oh, wow.
So now I have my first Shabbos experience.
Wow.
And although they weren't Orthodox Jews, they were part of my friend's congregation. And they had started adopting, as I said, some of the Jewish holidays. They had transitioned in the last year into doing Sabbath regularly, all the holidays. Turned out that this congregation was one of the early Messianic synagogues or Messianic churches in America back at that time. Today, there are a lot of them.
So these people weren't really even Jewish.
No, even though their name was Schneider, and I thought they were Jewish at first.
Okay.
No, they weren't. Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay.
So yeah, so my friend's congregation is this Messianic church or Messianic synagogue, and like I said, today there are hundreds of these in the country. There are hundreds of thousands of Messianic Jews or Messianic Christian/Jews, and even in Israel, Tovia Singer, he says there's probably 50,000 like this.
Wow.
So anyhow, this was an answer to my prayer in a way, because what I was looking for was what was Yeshua, Jesus, the real person who lived back there in the first century, really like. So all this is to lead up to answering what motivated me to convert. And this is kind of the big answer to it. I was trying to understand who Jesus was. And that brought me to Judaism.
Wow.
What I don't get a lot of details about all the different things that happened that summer, but I can tell you that this was not like other Messianic synagogues today, because what I realized from listening to the teachings of the ministers there was that Jesus wasn't God. I was very, very determined, devout, committed to Jesus, but always because I thought he was part of the triune God. So the first thing I ended up learning that summer from being with these people was that the Trinity was really a man-made doctrine, an idea that was kind of merging monotheism with paganism, something that the church made up in the 1st or 2nd century. And I really became convinced of that, even though that's not what they want to teach you when you go to seminary. Right. That's what I became convinced of. That was the first big change in my life then.
Wow.
That God is one. He doesn't have 3 parts. God certainly has no physicality. He's absolutely pure unity. He's one. That means Jesus cannot be God. Right. Jesus cannot be God. Jesus is a man. Christianity wants people to say that he's Jesus is 100% God, 100% man. He's some kind of unique creature or being or whatever. I gave up faith in that idea during that summer. And then the third thing was um, I realized I can't be a minister anymore. So
Wow.
I gave up the ministry.
Mm.
And then I decided, you know what? I'm not even going to go back to that school. I need to stay and study full time and figure out more and more about what this particular group was doing with First Testament or early Christianity, Hebrew Christianity, whatever term you want to call it, that was going on there. And so I dropped out of college and I changed in 6 weeks from being this devout, super energetic, born again, evangelistic Christian into a B'nai Noach.
Uh-huh. So I want to, what are your parents thinking? So first of all, when you had
So,
met, because you had mentioned your mom and your dad before, your dad wasn't so thrilled originally, but your mom was so supportive of it. Now you're dropping this. What are their reactions to this?
yeah, so I was still close to my family, uh, but I'm sharing. This is exactly what happened. I wrote a letter to my mom and dad about my first change in belief that God is a unity, that there is no parts to God, there's no triune God. And I wrote several pages explaining my beliefs and quoting passages from Tanakh to make my point. And a day or two, maybe a week later, I wrote another letter following up and saying that Jesus can't be God.
Mm.
Once you make that first conclusion, it's pretty easy to make the second one, right?
Right.
Although a lot of people will still hold him in high esteem and make him special, I wasn't even convinced about that. So I wrote a second letter like that. So in a very short time, they got two dramatic letters from me, and they contacted me and demanded that I come home immediately, that whatever I was involved in was a cult, it was false religion, it was wrong, and they were concerned about my soul, and I needed to come home.
Hmm.
Well, in interim between when they got that letter, called me, is when I said, I have more news for you, Mom and Dad. I'm dropping out of college. I'm giving up the Lutheran ministry. And that was like, you get on the next plane out. We'll get you here right away. I said, oh, in respect to my parents, I said, okay, I'll make a reservation. I'll get and I flew back to Sioux City.
Mm.
And they had ministers ready for me to talk to, some of my old friends and other people. They had somebody from Jews for Jesus for me to talk to. And I won't forget that it was a difficult time. But when I got off the plane and we were driving home, uh, they right away started asking me questions about what's going on. And I said, well, Mom and Dad, I tell you, I bought a round trip ticket. And they're like, what? We thought you were coming home to stay with us and we're going to get this straight figured out. I said, I'm coming home out of respect to be with you guys, but I'm going back to New York and I'm going to spend the summer there and the rest of this year.
Mm.
It was really hard for them. Um, I mentioned I was the oldest. There was a lot of pride my father had in me because his cousins were Lutheran school teachers or social workers. I was going to be the first Haar in the family legacy that was going to be a minister. So he was really proud of that.
Mm.
And this really shattered his dreams in a way.
Right. Mm.
And it did cause quite a break for us for a long time. And one of the things that changed that eventually was when I went through complete conversion and he met my future wife, whom I think you met.
Yes, I did. I did. So you met your wife, and I guess, as a parent, you probably could understand that perhaps when we see our children happy and moving on and having a life and having children of their own, sometimes our preconceived notions of what we wanted for them or hoped for them somehow slip to the background. And we could look at them and say, obviously when our kids are healthy, happy, functioning human beings, it's when they're not doing those things, yes. But I guess perhaps for him, he was able to put aside those other feelings he had once he saw that you were moving on with a wonderful person.
I think that's probably a big part of it. Um, I think something that I would share with your audience, and if I could spread the news now to a larger group of Jewish people, it'd be that um, many Christians were just like me, where they never had experience one-on-one or directly with a Jew. Their only knowledge of the Jewish people came from what they read in the Bible, most of what they read in the New Testament. And what they see there many times are bad stories. They're the good Jews. There's Jesus and his disciples and Mary and those people. But there are the Pharisees and the other people who rejected Jesus and didn't accept him as a Messiah. And so they have that lens about Jewish people, and it affects their view of Jews today, right? And sometimes they don't have the most charitable ideas about what Judaism is. They think it's a false idea, that it's not a true religion. That's what my father was concerned about, that I was getting involved with something that was not true and not, that it's going to affect my soul. Maybe the people weren't so honest. Maybe they weren't so trustworthy, the new group of friends I had. But when he actually met Ashira, my wife, he realized that she was extremely sincere, honest, devoted, caring and loving, all these positive characteristics. And that kind of is an echo of what happened to me when I met the kids at the University of Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here are all these young Jewish people dancing around, celebrating with the Torah, Simchat Torah. But wait a second. I've been just preaching for years that without Jesus, you're lost. You don't really have salvation. How can you be happy? How can you be rejoicing in God when you don't even have a connection to him from my theological point of view back then? So you have a cognitive dissonance when the Bible message you get about the Jewish people doesn't match up with a real experience with a live Jewish person.
Wow. Okay, so now could I jump to when you did actually convert for a second?
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
To
the second stage.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to jump. So because I think that intrigues people.
Yeah, because I could have stayed B'nai Noach
Right.
for a long time. In fact, I was for a long time. And yet I was practicing a lot of Jewish traditions. I kept kosher. I was very strict. That's first summer I gave up cheeseburgers and ham. That was easy. I became, got separate pots and pans and I learned about kashrut. I had a friend that I made that summer who eventually became a rabbi, went to Israel, came back as a rabbi. Wow. And he taught me from a book called the Ben Ish Chai. It's, halacha by the Ben Ish Chai.
Yes.
And so I learned Sephardic traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I wasn't in a formal study program to convert, he was willing to teach me. And he just figured, eventually I'll make a decision when that's, I guess that I'll convert. But he was just willing to teach me. And one of the first books I got, was the Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. I got Me'am Loez. I would read it every week. I was doing all these things, feeling like a spiritual Jew, even though I wasn't yet fully converted.
Right. Wow.
So what made me go that next step?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to have a Jewish family. Right? So I could, let's say you were single and I was still single. I could try to persuade you to, I'd be a good eligible bachelor. We could get married and you'd say, well, what's your credentials? Are you Jewish? Right.
Right.
And it'd become very obvious. No, I'm not. And that'd be the end of it. So I realized I'm not going to be able to convince too many Jewish women to intermarry, which is what it would be. I'm going to have to get the right credentials. I'm going to have to get the right hechsher. Mm-hmm. And my rabbi friend said exactly the same thing. He said, yeah, if you want to have a Jewish family, you have to have a Jewish wife. And the only way you can have a Jewish wife is if you convert.
Mm.
And I can't help you do that.
Right.
How come? Well, I'm not part of the Rabbinic Association here in America. You got to go call up the RCA. And so I did that. And eventually they connected me with a rabbi in Brooklyn. And he accepted me in classes. He was Ashkenaz. I learned some traditions from him. And after, right away, he said, my goodness, this is going to take 5 weeks for you to go through my class. You know everything. And you can teach the other classmates. So, yeah, I went through his conversion class program, or at least most of it. At a certain point, I told him that I had a Jewish girlfriend. He said, "Oh, gotta get you converted now. No more wasting time." And he introduced me to Gedalia Schwartz, the rabbi from Borough Park, and he was the Ab Bet Din for my conversion.
Mm. So can I ask you, what name did you pick? What's your Hebrew name, Jeff?
It's funny you asked that. I didn't know you could choose it. But he did ask me that question. And so let me share a little bit of the conversion process.
Okay.
Do you mind?
No.
It's one of the questions you prepared me for the possibility you would ask. So I have an answer that I was thinking about, and I think this is a good time to maybe share this.
Okay, sure.
So, it's not like in the old days of the temple where a male convert would have to be circumcised, go to the mikveh, and then bring a sacrifice. Today, we only have the first two steps. And for a woman, there's obviously, you don't have the first step. It's
Right.
just go to the mikveh. So I think I was expecting, this must be a pretty meaningful, deep, cool thing that I'm going to be going through. Rabbi Schwartz told me where to go in Williamsburg. This is where the mikveh is. Meet us here at such and such a time. I'll have the best din ready for you. And he had asked me about whether I was circumcised as a baby or not, which I told him I was. He said, "Okay, good. That makes things simpler." Okay, go to the mikveh, and you have these strangers. You have to. I won't get into all the details. Let's just say, they watched me very modestly. Everything was very discreet and very proper. Go into the mikveh and come out. And by the time I got dressed, they were all gone. Only Rabbi Schwartz was there. I'm like, what the heck? This is, I went through years of transition. I had classes with the rabbi, and this is how much you care about what I just did. No skies opened up. There were no voices. There was no parade for me. There was no party or anything. It was really kind of anticlimactic. And I realized that I was really alone. It was just me and God.
Oh, wow.
It's really me and God. And he asked me what name I wanted to have. And he said, normally converts have Aharon ben Avraham ben Avraham, but you could pick a different first name. Go by. So I picked Aharon because the Kohen Gadol, to me, his message of peace and his patience with the Jewish people, his interceding for them, I identified with those things.
Beautiful.
So Aharon ben Avraham is my Hebrew name.
Wow. So beautiful. I love that, you picked that. But I loved the other comment that you made, that it was just you and God.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful statement, and such a powerful aha moment. Because in actuality, we might have people in our lives, but when push comes to shove, it's really just us and God. And
Judaism has a lot of social aspects to it. I mean, I certainly love going to the synagogue. I have friends, and you have family, and the Jewish traditions are all family oriented.
Right.
But when I put the tallit over my head, I try to block all that out, and it's just me talking to Hashem.
Right. It's like the lonely man of faith, right? Rav Soloveitchik's book.
Yeah, Rabbi Soloveitchik. Yeah.
Yeah. So now, here you are, you got married, you start having kids. What was it like as a convert to live in the Jewish community? What I know for many years you have, out of all the people that I've interviewed, you've been a convert for the longest, 40 years. That's unbelievable. So you have the most experience. Did you find it hard, easy? Was there some moments that were more challenging than others?
Well, I
Share
have
with
some
us.
great relatives. I have some fantastic relatives. Um, you know, I have to add one little element to it. I don't know if you remember, my wife is Sephardic. And
Okay.
so one of the funny comments of my teacher, my rabbi, who was teaching me in Brooklyn when I finished conversion, and he invited me over for dinner. His wife had me there, and so what are your plans? What do you have a girlfriend? And well, it's such a shame, Jeff. You're such a nice guy, and you'd be such a catch. It's so hard to find people, though. And I said, well, yeah, but I really want to meet a Sephardic girl. She said, what? It's hard enough for you. You're a convert, and you want to try to find a Sephardic girl. And it turns out Shira is Sephardic. And the only reason I wanted to be Sephardic is earlier in that stage of transition, when I took that year off, I visited a lot of different synagogues. And I also visited the Spanish Portuguese synagogue in New York City, the Sheret Israel.
Mm.
And I really liked the davening there. And I had a conversation with the rabbi. My name came up, and he said, that's a Sephardic name. Har is, you'll find that in Amsterdam. And in fact, I saw Rabbi Cardoza a few years later. He came to our house, and he said, "Oh, your name is definitely in tombstones in back there in Amsterdam." So I made the decision early on to learn Sephardic because of that. And as I mentioned, my friend came back, and he taught me Sephardic traditions from the Ben Ish Chai.
Right.
And I wanted to meet a girl who would be Sephardic.
Okay.
But my relatives, Jewish relatives, are all Ashkenaz.
Oh, really?
Yeah. All but no, I take that back. She's Sephardic, so her brothers are obviously Sephardic, and her sisters, but they married Ashkenaz guys. That's why I made it sound.
Okay.
And they have been great in accepting me, helping me, teaching my children when I couldn't teach them their bar and bat mitzvah parshas and stuff like that.
Mm.
I think you asked me a question about challenges, and
Yes.
if I was a Ben Noach thinking of converting, living in Texas or Tennessee or something, and I say I want to become Jewish, I do have a warning for that person.
Okay.
It isn't so much about the social aspect, although that is difficult. If you don't have you don't have a connection through relatives like I did, it is hard to find connections with people who grew up with each other, went to camp with each other, have business relationships and so forth, and you're like this outsider. That's why you're called a stranger, a ger. And that is a little bit off-putting sometimes. But what they don't tell you in conversion classes is how expensive it is to be Jewish.
I love that.
You're going to buy expensive meat. That part you can figure out during conversion classes. You start buying kosher food, but they don't tell you what the tuition is when you send your kids to school. And they don't tell you about the dues that you pay at the synagogue and stuff like that. In fact, one of the shocks I had through the conversion process, I had to pay for my conversion classes. The rabbi doesn't do it for free. I had to pay him.
Oh gosh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so
right.
and keep in mind, if you're going to be Orthodox, you're going to have to live within a walking distance of a synagogue. So you know what the housing prices are
real estate, right?
So all that in mind, I had no idea how much I had financially committed myself to when I signed up for Judaism.
For Judaism. Wonderful,
I was prepared for tithing, but not for that.
I love that. That's expense. Great, Jeff. Time is running out on my end, but I like to end with one question. Out of your 5 senses, Jeff, which one do you find to be your strongest, and what role has that one sense that's the strongest played in your life, your Jewish journey, so on and so forth.
Do you ask everybody this question?
I do.
And what's usually the answer?
Some people said the sense of smell, that they just very much liked the smell, and it reminds them of the Besamim at Havdalah. Some people like the taste, the foods.
For me, it was sight. For me,
Sight.
sight. Yeah. And although my sight has diminished and I have to wear glasses now, without sight, I wouldn't have been able to do all the reading that I have over the years. I have a lot of books behind me and in the other room and upstairs, and I've read almost every single one of these books. So without sight, I would be lost. And my weakest one, maybe that's another way to ask the question, is probably audible. I'm terrible with languages. My Shira is great with languages. She can speak 5 languages. I'm lucky I can speak English.
Wow. I love this. I love it, Jeff. Is there anything else before we say goodbye that you'd like to add, or just say something?
Yeah, there's one thing I would like to add as a message. I think you had sent me a list question. I remember the one about sight or senses. Is there a message I want to give to my fellow Jews, to the Jewish people, and especially at this time, after what happened with October 7th? I think it's very, very important to take to heart the realization that the world is not just Jews and Goyim. It's easy to think the Jews and non-Jews, but there's actually Jews, B'nai Noach, and then the nations. The B'nai Noach, you say, well, they're with the Goyim, but they are people who are affiliated with Hashem. They are our allies religiously. And there are also very sincere, well-meaning, Jew-loving Gentiles. We're not a nation alone, all by ourselves. Although sometimes we think that, we do have people who want to be here for Israel and for the Jewish people. In his book, Future Tense, right? I don't know if you read the book, but this is one of his major themes. And I would really like to just close with a message that now, especially with what's going on with our country, Israel, and even here in America, Jewish people being attacked with anti-Semitism, it can be depressing, but I think our best days are ahead of us, and that it's important for us to keep a very optimistic approach and be outward bound, not to go into ourselves, and that we as Jews need to still go out and reach out to our friends and support them, and they'll support us.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful message, especially for today's day and age.